The warning klaxon screamed through the corridors of Station Nexus 7, the largest monitoring outpost in the Galactic Empire's Outer Rim territory. Commander Zexhai of the Valerian species pressed all four of his hands against the control console, his scaled face tight with concentration as data streams flowed across multiple holographic displays. Report, he barked at his mixed-species crew, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent 3 decades keeping watch over the Empire's borders. Lieutenant Cora, a young Nexari with bright blue skin and tentacle-like appendages for hair, looked up from her sensor station. Her large eyes showed confusion and fear. "Sir, we have an unidentified contact approaching from a void between galaxies. It's moving at impossible speeds." "Define impossible," Zexhai demanded, his secondary arms working frantically over tactical displays while his primary hands gripped the command rail. "The object is traveling at 700 times the speed of light, sir. Our fastest ships can barely manage 50 times light speed." Cora's voice trembled slightly. "The energy signature is unlike anything in our databases." Zexhai felt his stomach clench. In his 30 years of service, he had seen crystalline raiders who could phase through solid matter, the dreaded Shadow Fleet that could bend space itself, and even the mysterious ancient builders whose technology still puzzled the greatest minds in the Empire. But nothing moved that fast. Nothing should be able to move that fast without tearing itself apart. "Size estimates?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer. Chief Petty Officer Grand, a massive Thurian whose rocky hide made him look like a walking boulder, rumbled from the engineering station. "Approximately 2 kilometers long, sir. Configuration unknown. It's not matching any ship design in our records." 2 kilometers? Zexhai repeated, his mind racing. That was larger than most battlecruisers, but smaller than the Empire's massive dreadnoughts. Still, at that speed and size, even a peaceful vessel could level entire planets if it chose to ram them. The main view screen flickered to life, showing a distant speck against the star field. Even at maximum magnification, the object remained frustratingly unclear, just a dark shape that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Communication attempts?" Zexhai inquired, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Negative response on all frequencies, sir," replied Ensign Yila, the ship's communication specialist. The young Etherian's normally silver skin had turned pale white with stress. "We've tried standard galactic protocols, emergency frequencies, even mathematical sequences. Nothing." Zexhai studied the tactical display showing the object's projected course. It was heading straight for the heart of the Empire, toward the core worlds where billions of citizens lived in relative peace, protected by the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen. "Time to Empire border?" he asked. "At current speed, approximately 18 hours, sir," Cora responded immediately. 18 hours. Zexhai had 18 hours to figure out what this thing was, and whether it posed a threat to the greatest civilization the galaxy had known. The Galactic Empire stretched across 47 star systems, encompassing 12 different species that had learned to work together after centuries of warfare. They had achieved peace through strength, prosperity through cooperation, and security through constant vigilance. But vigilance meant nothing against an enemy that moved faster than anything they had ever encountered. "Send an immediate alert to Imperial Command," Zexhai ordered. "Priority Alpha classification. Unknown vessel. Speed capabilities beyond known technology. Heading directly for Empire space. Include all sensor data and project course." "Message sent, sir," Yila confirmed. "Response time approximately 4 hours. 4 hours for Imperial Command to receive the message, analyze it, and send back orders. 14 hours remaining before the unknown ship reached Empire space." Zexhai had commanded border stations long enough to know that 4 hours might as well be 4 days when facing an immediate threat. "Grand, I want a full analysis of that energy signature. Cross-reference it with everything in the ancient builder databases, the precursor archives, and any theoretical physics papers published in the last century." "Understood, sir," the Thurian rumbled, his massive fingers surprisingly delicate as they worked across the research terminals. "Cora, track that ship's exact trajectory. I want to know where it came from and exactly where it's going. If it maintains course and speed, what systems will it pass through?" The young Nexari's tentacles writhed as she worked, a sign of intense concentration among her people. "Sir, if it maintains current heading, it will pass within scanning range of the Meridian system in 16 hours," then continued toward the Valerian home system. Zexai's blood ran cold. The Valerian system held 12 billion of his people, including his own family on the third planet. The Empire's capital worlds lay beyond that, housing the central government and another 50 billion citizens. Have we considered the possibility that it's not a ship? Asked Dr. Venn, the station's chief science officer. The elderly Kaldorian approached the command area, her gray robes rustling around her thin frame. The energy readings are unusual enough that we might be looking at a natural phenomenon. A natural phenomenon that maintains a perfect straight-line course. ZHI questins skeptical. There are theoretical space-time distortions that could appear to behave with purpose, Dr. Venn replied, though her tone suggested she didn't believe her own words. Perhaps a wormhole terminus that's moving through normal space. At 700 times light speed? Grand interjected from his station. Commander, I've run the energy signature through every database we have. There are some similarities to ancient builder technology, but the power output is orders of magnitude higher than anything they ever created. Zexai turned back to the main screen, where the mysterious object continued its relentless approach. The ancient builders had vanished from the galaxy over 10,000 years ago, leaving behind only ruins and artifacts that the Empire's best scientists still couldn't fully understand. Their technology was so advanced that even small devices could power entire cities. If this was ancient builder technology, but more powerful than anything they had ever discovered, then the Empire was facing something beyond their ability to comprehend or combat. Sir, Cora called out, her voice tight with worry. The object just changed course slightly. It's now heading directly for Station Nexus 7. The command deck fell silent except for the hum of electronics and the distant vibration of the station's massive fusion reactors. Zexai felt every eye turn toward him, waiting for orders that might determine whether they lived or died in the next few hours. Red alert, he announced calmly, though his hearts were racing. All personnel to battle stations. Charge all defensive systems and prepare to evacuate non-essential personnel. Sir, at that speed, we'll have less than 30 seconds once it enters weapons range, Lieutenant Cora pointed out. Our evacuation pods won't have time to reach minimum safe distance. Then, we'll have to make our stand here, Zexai replied grimly. Send another message to Imperial Command. Priority Alpha 1. Unknown vessel has altered course and is now approaching our position directly. Request immediate reinforcement and orders. He paused, looking around at his crew. These beings had served with him for years, becoming like family despite their different species and origins. They trusted him to keep them safe, to make the right decisions when everything was on the line. Also send word to all Empire monitoring stations, he continued. If we don't survive the next few hours, they need to know what we learned here. The galaxy depends on it. The next few hours passed with agonizing slowness as the crew worked frantically to learn everything they could about the approaching vessel. Dr. Venn and her team ran countless simulations trying to understand how anything could move that fast without violating known physics. Grand and the engineering crew prepared every defensive system the station possessed, though they all knew their weapons were designed to stop pirates and raiders, not mysterious super technology ships. Meanwhile, Zexai found himself staring at the tactical display, watching the distance numbers count down with mechanical precision. 750 million kilometers, 500 million, 300 million. Each number brought them closer to answers they might not live to share. Commander, Dr. Venn approached his station, holding a data pad with her analysis results. I've been studying the ship's energy signature more carefully. There's something odd about the readings. Odd how? Zexai asked, grateful for any distraction from the countdown to potential death. The energy output isn't what we would expect from conventional propulsion systems. It's too clean, too efficient. Whatever is powering that ship appears to be converting matter directly into energy with nearly perfect efficiency. That's impossible, Grand rumbled from across the command deck. Perfect matter-energy conversion would require technology that violates half the known laws of physics. Yet here we are, Dr. Venn replied quietly, looking at sensor readings that suggest exactly that. Zexai studied the data pad, though much of the scientific notation was beyond his military training. What he could understand was disturbing enough. The ship approaching them was using technology that shouldn't exist, powered by processes that their best scientists claimed were impossible. Sir, Cora called out urgently. The object is decelerating. All conversation stopped as everyone turned to the tactical display. For the first time since detection, the mysterious ship was changing speed. The deceleration was gradual, but noticeable, bringing its velocity down from impossible to merely incredible. Current speed? Zexai asked. Reducing to 400 times light speed and continuing to slow, Cora reported. At this rate of deceleration, it will reach normal space velocities approximately 20 minutes before arriving at our position. It's going to stop, Dr. Van whispered, her scientific mind racing ahead to implications. Nothing decelerates in deep space unless it intends to stop or change course significantly. Or unless it's targeting us, Zexai added grimly. Maintain red alert. All stations remain ready. The waiting that followed was worse than the approach. At least before, they had known the ship would pass by at incredible speed, probably without noticing their small monitoring station. Now it was deliberately slowing down, which suggested intelligence, purpose, and possibly hostile intent. When the proximity alarms finally sounded, announcing the arrival of the unknown vessel, Zexai was almost relieved that the waiting was over. Whatever happened next, they would finally have answers to questions that had plagued them for the past 18 hours. Contact established, Cora announced, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. Unknown vessel is holding position 5,000 kilometers off our starboard sensor array. On screen, Zexai ordered. The main view screen flickered and then displayed an image that would haunt his dreams for the rest of his life, however long that might be. The ship was unlike anything he had ever seen or imagined. It was sleek and angular, built from what appeared to be a dark metallic substance that reflected no light. Strange energy patterns danced along its hull, creating an almost hypnotic display of colors that seemed to shift and flow like liquid fire. But what struck him most was not its alien design or impossible technology. It was the sense of age and power that seemed to radiate from the vessel, even through the view screen. This was no ordinary ship built by an ordinary civilization. This was something ancient and terrible and completely beyond their understanding. Any response to communication attempts? He asked, though he could see from Yila's expression that the answer was negative. Nothing, sir. But she hesitated, adjusting controls at her station. There's something else. I'm detecting energy patterns that suggest scanning beams. It's examining our station with incredible precision. What kind of scans? Dr. Vin asked quickly. Unknown technology, but the penetration depth suggests it can see through our hull as if it were transparent. It knows our crew complement, our defensive capabilities, our power systems. Everything. Zexai felt a chill run down his spine. In less than 30 seconds, the unknown ship had learned more about their station than enemy spies could discover in months of infiltration. If it was hostile, they were completely at its mercy. Sir, Gron called out from engineering. I'm detecting a massive power buildup in the unknown vessel. Energy levels are rising exponentially. This was it, Zexai realized. Whatever the mysterious ship intended to do, it was about to happen. He looked around the command deck one last time, seeing the fear and determination in his crew's faces. They had served well and faithfully, and if they were about to die, they would face it as the professional soldiers and explorers they had always been. All hands, he announced over the station's communication system. Prepare for possible hostile action. It has been my honor to serve with all of you. The energy readings from the unknown ship reached critical levels, and Zexai found himself holding his breath, waiting for the end to come with whatever terrible weapon the alien vessel was preparing to unleash upon them. The energy buildup in the unknown vessel suddenly stopped, leaving Station Nexus 7 bathed in an eerie silence broken only by the nervous breathing of the crew. Commander Zexai waited for death, destruction, or worse, but nothing happened. The mysterious ship simply hung in space, its dark hull occasionally flickering with those strange energy patterns. Sir, Lieutenant Cora whispered, her voice barely audible in the tense atmosphere of the command deck. Something's happening. Before Zexai could ask what she meant, the main view screen flickered and changed. Instead of showing the exterior view of the alien vessel, it now displayed what appeared to be the interior of the ship. The image was clear and sharp, as if they were looking through a window into another world. The interior was vast, far larger than the ship's exterior dimensions should have allowed. Smooth, curved walls stretched into the distance, lit by a soft blue glow that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. But what captured everyone's attention was the figure standing in the center of the image. It was humanoid, roughly the same height as a Valerian, but there the similarities ended. The being wore what appeared to be a simple gray uniform, but its physical features were unlike any species in the galactic database. Pale skin, short brown hair, and eyes that seemed to hold intelligence and curiosity rather than hostility. "Greetings," the figure said, and everyone on the command deck jumped. The voice was coming through their communication systems, speaking perfect galactic standard with only a slight accent. "I am Commander Sarah Chun of the UES Discovery. I apologize for any alarm our arrival may have caused." Zexai stared at the screen in shock. In his decades of experience dealing with first-contact situations, he had never encountered anything like this. The being appeared calm, even friendly, despite piloting a ship that defied every known law of physics. "UES Discovery," he repeated slowly. "Unknown designation. Commander Chun, what is your species and point of origin?" The human smiled, an expression that was surprisingly similar to the same gesture among several galactic species. "I represent humanity from the planet Earth in what you would call the Orion Spiral. We're explorers seeking to make peaceful contact with other intelligent species." "Humanity," Dr. Venn whispered, quickly working at a research station. "No records in any database. And the Orion Spiral." She paused, checking her astronomical charts. "Commander, that's outside our galaxy entirely." Sarah Chin nodded, as if she had heard the quiet conversation. "That's correct. We come from what you might know as Galaxy Designation M47, approximately 2.5 million light-years from your current position." The command deck fell silent. 2.5 million light-years. The distance was so vast that it took light from their neighboring galaxy millions of years to reach them. No known technology could cross such distances, even with the fastest ships the Empire possessed. "Ow!" Grand rumbled, his rocky features showing the same confusion everyone felt. "How did you travel such a distance?" "Our scientists developed what we call the Alcubierre drive system approximately 50 years ago," Chen explained patiently. "It allows us to contract space in front of our ship and expand it behind us, creating a bubble of normal space-time that can move faster than light without violating relativity." Dr. Venn was frantically taking notes, her scientific mind racing to understand the implications. The energy requirements for such a system would be enormous. "How do you power it?" "Controlled antimatter reactions," Chen replied simply. "We've learned to create and store antimatter safely, using it to power our long-range exploration vessels." Zexai felt his world shifting around him. The Galactic Empire prided itself on being the most technologically advanced civilization in the galaxy. Their ships, weapons, and technology represented the pinnacle of scientific achievement developed over thousands of years by 12 different species working together. And now this human was casually describing technology that made their greatest achievements look like primitive tools. "Commander Chun," he said carefully, "you mentioned that you're explorers. What are your intentions regarding our space?" "Purely peaceful," Chen assured him. "We're conducting a survey of this galaxy, cataloging inhabited systems, and making friendly contact where possible. We detected your monitoring station and decided to introduce ourselves properly rather than simply passing through your territory." "Survey of this galaxy," Cora repeated quietly. "Sir, if they can travel between galaxies, surveying an entire galaxy would be trivial." Zexai finished grimly. A species that could cross intergalactic distances would find mapping a single galaxy as simple as the Empire found mapping a single star system. "How many of your ships are conducting this survey?" he asked, dreading the answer. Chen paused thoughtfully. "Discovery is one of 12 exploration vessels currently operating in this galaxy. We also have a science station established in the void between galaxies to coordinate our efforts. 12 ships. 12 ships with technology that could cross between galaxies, powered by controlled antimatter, and equipped with sensors that could see through station hulls as if they were made of glass. If these humans decided the Empire was a threat, the war would be over before it began." "Commander Zexai," Chen continued, and he realized she had somehow learned his name, though he hadn't provided it. "I understand this must be overwhelming. First contact situations always are, for both sides. Perhaps we could arrange a more formal meeting to discuss our respective civilizations. You would be willing to meet in person? Dr. Ven asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. Of course, Chen replied with that strange smile. Though I should mention that Discovery is not equipped for hosting large delegations. We're primarily a research vessel with minimal crew quarters. How minimal? Zexai asked. 500 crew members, Chen answered casually. 500 beings operating a ship that was 2 kilometers long and capable of intergalactic travel. The Empire's smallest cruisers required crews of 3,000 just to maintain basic operations. I could transport small groups to your station for face-to-face discussions, Chen offered. Our shuttlecraft are designed for diplomatic meetings. Before Zexai could respond, Yila called out urgently from the communication station. Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from Imperial Command. Put it through, Zexai ordered, though he suspected he already knew what the message would contain. Admiral Corvex appeared on a secondary screen, his massive Thurian frame filling the display. The Admiral's rocky features were set in grim lines as he began speaking immediately. Commander Zexai, Imperial Command has analyzed your reports regarding the unknown vessel. By order of the Imperial Council, you are to treat this as a potential threat to Empire security. Attempt to gather intelligence on their capabilities and intentions. Do not reveal any information about Empire defenses or strategic assets. The message continued with technical instructions and protocols, but Zexai found himself looking back at Commander Chun, who was still visible on the main screen. The human appeared to be listening to the Imperial Command message with polite interest. When Admiral Corvex finished speaking and the transmission ended, Chen nodded respectfully. Your military command seems appropriately cautious. That's wise when dealing with unknown contacts. You heard our communication? Zexai asked, though he already knew the answer. Our sensors are quite sensitive, Chen admitted. But please don't be concerned about security. We have no hostile intentions toward your empire, and we certainly don't want to cause a diplomatic incident over a simple misunderstanding. Simple misunderstanding. Zexai almost laughed at the casual way she described a situation that had sent the entire Imperial fleet to high alert status. Commander Chun, my government will want to know more about humanity and your capabilities. Would you be willing to share information about your technology and intentions in this galaxy? Chen considered the question carefully. I can share general information about our exploration mission and our technology within reasonable limits. We're happy to establish diplomatic relations with peaceful civilizations. And if we're not peaceful? Grand asked bluntly. Chen's expression became more serious. Then, we would regretfully avoid further contact and continue our survey elsewhere. We don't interfere in the internal affairs of other civilizations, even if we disapprove of their actions. But you could interfere if you chose to, Dr. Ven observed quietly. Many civilizations could interfere with others if they chose to, Chen replied diplomatically. The question is whether they believe such interference is morally justified. Humanity learned long ago that force change rarely leads to lasting improvement. Zexai found himself studying the human commander with growing respect. Despite possessing technology that could probably conquer the Empire in a matter of days, she spoke of morality and non-interference. Either humanity was genuinely peaceful, or they were incredibly skilled at deception. Commander Chun, I'm going to be frank with you, he said finally. Your technology is far beyond anything we possess. Your single ship could probably destroy our most powerful fleet. That makes my government very nervous. Chen nodded understandingly. I can appreciate that concern. Perhaps I can offer some reassurance. Discovery is an exploration vessel, not a warship. We carry defensive systems sufficient to protect ourselves, but we have no weapons designed for planetary bombardment or fleet engagement. What kind of defensive systems? Krunt inquired. Energy shields capable of deflecting most known weapons, point defense systems for intercepting missiles or fighters, and emergency protocols for rapid withdrawal if faced with overwhelming force. Dr. Ven was taking detailed notes, her scientific mind cataloging every piece of information. Commander Chun, would you be willing to demonstrate some of your technology? For scientific purposes? Chen smiled again. I think that could be arranged. What would you like to see? Before anyone could answer, the proximity alarm sounded again. Cora looked up from her sensor station with confusion. Sir, I'm detecting new contacts approaching our position. Multiple vessels, Imperial signatures. Zexai checked his tactical display and felt his stomach sink. 12 Imperial cruisers were approaching at maximum speed, their weapons charged and ready for battle. Admiral Corvex had apparently decided that diplomacy was less important than making a show of force. "Commander Chun," he said urgently, "I'm afraid we may have a problem." The human commander studied something off-screen, presumably her own sensor displays. "I see them. 12 military vessels, approaching at what appears to be their maximum velocity. Are they here to reinforce your station? More likely to confront your ship," Zexhai admitted reluctantly. "My government tends to respond to unknown threats with military force." Chun sighed, an expression that conveyed disappointment and resignation. "How unfortunate. I was hoping our first contact could remain peaceful and productive." "It still can," Dr. Venn said quickly. "Commander, surely your people and ours can work out some kind of understanding." "Perhaps," Chun replied, though her tone suggested she was less optimistic. "Commander Zexhai, I'm going to move Discovery to a position that doesn't threaten your station or the approaching fleet. I hope that will demonstrate our peaceful intentions." On the tactical display, the unknown vessel began moving with impossible grace, accelerating to tremendous speed in seconds before decelerating just as quickly to take up a position several thousand kilometers away from both the station and the approaching Imperial fleet. "Incredible," Gron muttered, watching the display. "The acceleration forces should have crushed anyone aboard that ship." "We have artificial gravity systems that compensate for acceleration effects," Chin explained helpfully. "It allows us to maneuver at high speed without harming the crew." The Imperial fleet continued its approach, and Zexhai knew he had very little time before a peaceful first contact became a potential interstellar war. The Empire's ships were powerful, but he had no doubt that they would be completely outclassed by technology that could cross between galaxies. "Commander Chun," he said urgently, "I'm going to patch you through to Admiral Corvex when he arrives. Perhaps direct communication can prevent any misunderstandings." "I would welcome the opportunity," Chun replied, "though I should warn you that Discovery will defend itself if attacked. We have protocols for dealing with hostile contact." Zexhai felt a chill as he realized that the next few minutes might determine whether the galaxy would gain a powerful ally or face an enemy beyond their ability to defeat. The Empire's fate might depend on whether Admiral Corvex was willing to listen before he started shooting. As the Imperial fleet closed the final distance to their position, he found himself praying to whatever gods might be listening that wisdom would prevail over fear and aggression. The alternative was too terrible to contemplate. Admiral Corvex's flagship, the massive dreadnought Eternal Vigilance, dropped out of faster-than-light travel with the precision of a military force that had never known defeat. The 12 Imperial cruisers arranged themselves in a defensive formation around Station Nexus 7, their weapons trained on the mysterious human vessel. Commander Zexhai watched the tactical display with growing dread. The Empire's ships were impressive by any galactic standard, but compared to the technology he had just witnessed, they looked like primitive clubs facing energy weapons. "This is Admiral Corvex of the Imperial Navy," came the transmission from the flagship. "Unknown vessel. You are in violation of Imperial space. Identify yourself immediately and prepare to be boarded for inspection." On the main screen, Commander Chun maintained her calm expression, though Zexhai could see a slight tightening around her eyes. "Admiral Corvex, I am Commander Sarah Chun of the UES Discovery. We are peaceful explorers conducting a scientific survey of this galaxy. We have no hostile intentions and request diplomatic dialogue." "Negative," Corvex replied immediately. "Your ship's capabilities represent a clear threat to Imperial security. You will submit to boarding and inspection, where you will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly." Zexhai felt his heart sink. He knew Admiral Corvex personally, had served under him for 5 years early in his career. The Admiral was a good soldier and a competent commander, but he was also inflexible when it came to potential threats to the Empire. There would be no negotiation, no compromise, only submission or conflict. "Commander Chun," he said quickly over a private channel, "Admiral Corvex is not going to back down. You should leave now, before the situation escalates." Chun looked directly at him through the screen, and for a moment he felt as if she was looking into his soul. "Commander Zexhai, if we leave now under these circumstances, your government will interpret it as evidence that we have something to hide. That could lead to unfortunate assumptions about our intentions." Better than a shooting war, Dr. Van whispered, though she kept her voice low enough that the communication system didn't pick it up. Admiral Corvex, Chun said, returning her attention to the Imperial fleet. I understand your concerns, but I cannot allow armed personnel to board Discovery. Our technology is beyond your current understanding, and an inspection could be dangerous for your people. Are you threatening us? Corvex demanded, his rocky features contorting with anger. Not at all, Chun replied calmly. I'm simply stating a fact. Some of our systems operate on principles that could be harmful to individuals without proper protection. For example, our power core generates antimatter at the quantum level. Any mistake during an inspection could result in a catastrophic explosion. Zexai saw several of his crew members exchange worried glances. An antimatter explosion from a ship that size could destroy everything within several thousand kilometers, including Station Nexus 7 and the Imperial fleet. You're bluffing, Admiral Corvex announced, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely certain. I'm not, Chun replied simply, though I should clarify that our safety systems are designed to prevent such accidents. I'm merely explaining why allowing untrained personnel aboard Discovery would be inadvisable. Dr. Ven leaned forward, studying the readings from her science station. Commander, I'm detecting energy patterns from their ship that are consistent with what she described. If that really is an antimatter reactor, it's operating at power levels that could vaporize a small moon. The communication channel crackled as Admiral Corvex consulted with his staff aboard the flagship. Zexai could imagine the heated discussion taking place, with tactical officers arguing for immediate attack, while science advisors urged caution. Unknown vessel, Corvex said finally, you have 1 minute to withdraw from Imperial space. After that, you will be considered hostile and engaged accordingly. Zexai felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. The Admiral had just issued an ultimatum to a ship that could probably destroy his entire fleet without working up sweat. Either Chun would withdraw, making the Empire look weak and paranoid, or she would stand her ground and force a confrontation that could only end badly for the Empire. Admiral, Chun replied, I respectfully decline to leave. Discovery has a right to free passage through open space, and we have committed no hostile acts. However, I understand your position, and I'm willing to offer a compromise. What kind of compromise? Corvex asked suspiciously. I'll allow one of your representatives to come aboard Discovery for a brief tour. They can verify that we are indeed peaceful explorers and report back to your command. In exchange, you agree to allow us to continue our survey mission without interference. Corvex was quiet for several long seconds. Who would conduct this tour? I would personally escort your representative, Chun replied. They would be given access to our common areas and scientific facilities, though certain sections would remain off-limits for safety reasons. I volunteer, Dr. Ven said suddenly, standing up from her science station. If someone is going to inspect their technology, it should be a scientist who can understand what they're seeing. Zexai stared at her in shock. Dr. Ven, we don't know anything about their life support systems, their internal environment, or whether their ship is even safe for our species. Which is exactly why we need someone to find out, she replied calmly. Commander Chun, would your ship be suitable for a Caldorian visitor? We breathe a nitrogen-oxygen mixture and require temperatures between 15 and 30 degrees Celsius. Our life support systems can accommodate those requirements, Chun assured her. Dr. Ven, is it? I would be honored to show you around Discovery. I think you'll find our scientific facilities quite interesting. Admiral Corvex's voice cut across the conversation. Absolutely not. I'm not sending a civilian scientist aboard an unknown vessel. If anyone is going, it will be a military officer. With respect, Admiral, Dr. Ven replied firmly, a military officer won't understand what they're seeing. If you want useful intelligence about their capabilities, you need someone with a scientific background to comprehend their technology. Zexai found himself in the uncomfortable position of agreeing with both his science officer and his commanding admiral. Dr. Ven was right about needing scientific expertise, but Corvex was equally right about the risks of sending a civilian into an unknown situation. Commander Chun, he said finally, would you be willing to accept a compromise? Dr. Ven accompanied by a military escort. Chun considered the proposal. I could accommodate 2 visitors, though I should warn you that Discovery is quite large. A complete tour would take several hours. Unacceptable, Corvex declared immediately. I'm not risking 2 lives on the word of an unknown alien species. Then, perhaps we're at an impasse, Chen replied sadly. I cannot allow an armed boarding party aboard Discovery, and you're unwilling to accept a peaceful exchange of representatives. I'm afraid that leaves us with very few options. Zexai watched the tactical display, showing the Imperial fleet surrounding the human ship. Weapons were charged, shields were raised, and every sensor was focused on the mysterious vessel. The Empire's finest warships were ready for battle, but he had no doubt that they were about to face an enemy unlike anything they had ever encountered. Admiral, he said over a private channel to the flagship, I strongly recommend accepting Commander Chen's offer. In the past several hours, I've observed technology that exceeds our capabilities in every measurable way. If this becomes a shooting war, we will lose. That's defeatist thinking, Commander, Korvex replied sharply. No single ship can stand against an entire fleet, regardless of technology. Before Zexai could respond, alarms began sounding throughout Station Nexus 7. Lieutenant Cora looked up from her sensor station with shock and fear written across her face. Sir, I'm detecting massive energy buildups across the Imperial fleet. All ships are preparing to fire. On the main screen, Commander Chen's expression became grim. Admiral Korvex, I'm detecting weapon charging sequences from your vessels. I strongly advise against taking hostile action. Your threats don't impress me, Korvex replied coldly. You're outnumbered 12-1. Surrender now or face the consequences. Chen looked directly into the camera pickup, and Zexai could see genuine sadness in her eyes. Admiral, I try to resolve this peacefully. Please reconsider. You have 10 seconds to surrender, Korvex announced. Zexai watched in horror as the countdown proceeded. 10, 9, 8. Chen stood calmly on the bridge of her ship, making no aggressive moves, issuing no threats. 7, 6, 5. The Imperial fleet hung in space like predators ready to strike. 4, 3, 2. All ships, open fire, Admiral Korvex commanded. The space around Station Nexus 7 erupted in brilliant light as 12 Imperial cruisers unleashed their full arsenal simultaneously. Particle beams, plasma cannons, and antimatter torpedoes converged on the human ship in a concentrated barrage that could have leveled continents. For a moment, the UES Discovery disappeared behind a wall of energy and explosions. Zexai found himself hoping that Chun had been bluffing about her ship's capabilities, that the overwhelming firepower of the Imperial fleet would end this confrontation quickly and decisively. Then, the light faded, and Discovery sat exactly where it had been before, completely undamaged. Impossible, Grond rumbled, staring at the sensor readings. Nothing could survive that kind of concentrated firepower. Their shields didn't even fluctuate, Dr. Venn observed, her voice filled with scientific wonder and growing fear. Whatever they're using for protection, it absorbed our entire attack without any apparent effort. On the main screen, Commander Chen looked disappointed, but not surprised. Admiral Korvex, you have fired upon a peaceful vessel conducting a diplomatic mission. This action was unnecessary and regrettable. All ships, continuous fire, Korvex ordered desperately. Target their engines and weapon systems. The Imperial fleet opened up again, this time sustaining their attack instead of delivering a single massive volley. Beams and projectiles hammered against Discovery's shields continuously, creating a light show visible across several star systems. Discovery remained motionless and undamaged. After 30 seconds of futile bombardment, Chun spoke again. Admiral, you're wasting ammunition and energy. Our defensive systems are designed to protect us from hazards far more dangerous than conventional weapons. Please cease fire so we can resolve this situation peacefully. But Korvex was beyond reason now. Deploy fighters, he commanded. All ships, ramming speed. If we can't destroy them, we'll take them with us. Zexai watched in dismay as small fighter craft swarmed from the Imperial ships while the massive cruisers began accelerating toward Discovery at maximum speed. It was a desperate, suicidal tactic that might work against conventional enemies, but against technology this advanced, it was simply throwing lives away. Commander Chun, he said urgently over the communication channel, please don't destroy our ships. Most of those crews are just following orders. Chun looked at him with understanding. I have no intention of harming your people, Commander. But I can't allow them to damage Discovery either. What happened next would be talked about in military academies for generations to come. Discovery didn't fire weapons or deploy any obvious defensive systems. Instead, the space around the human ship seemed to ripple and fold, creating a distortion field that extended outward in all directions. The Imperial fighters simply stopped moving forward, their engines straining against some invisible force that held them motionless in space. The massive cruisers, traveling at enormous speed toward their intended target, found themselves slowing down as if they were moving through thick liquid. Within seconds, the entire Imperial fleet was trapped in what could only be described as a localized space-time distortion. Ships hung motionless in space, their crews unharmed but completely unable to continue their attack. "What have you done to my ships?" Corvex demanded, his voice showing the first signs of real fear. "Created a temporary spatial distortion field," Chen replied calmly. "Your vessels are unharmed, but they cannot move until I release the field. Consider this a demonstration of why attacking Discovery was inadvisable." Dr. Vin was frantically working at her science station, trying to understand what they were witnessing. "Commander, the energy readings are off the scale. They're manipulating space-time itself as easily as we manipulate electromagnetic fields." Zexai felt the last of his military confidence drain away. The Empire's most powerful fleet had just been effortlessly neutralized by technology that treated the laws of physics like suggestions rather than absolute rules. "Commander Chun," he said quietly, "what do you want from us?" Chun smiled sadly. "The same thing I wanted an hour ago, Commander. A peaceful conversation between representatives of our civilizations. Unfortunately, Admiral Corvex seems to prefer military solutions to diplomatic problems." "Release my ships," Corvex demanded, though his tone had changed from commanding to pleading. "Of course, Admiral. But first, I need your word that you'll cease hostile actions and allow diplomatic discussions to proceed. I have no desire to hold your fleet indefinitely." There was a long pause as Corvex undoubtedly consulted with his officers and superiors. Finally, his voice came through the communication system, defeated but still defiant. "You have my word that Imperial forces will not attack your ship again. But don't think this is over. The Empire does not forget threats to its security." "I understand," Chen replied, "and I hope that someday your government will come to realize that humanity poses no threat to your empire." The space-time distortion field around the Imperial fleet suddenly disappeared, and the ships found themselves free to move again. But instead of resuming their attack, they held position, waiting for orders from an admiral who had just learned that everything he thought he knew about warfare was obsolete. Zexai looked around his command deck at the faces of his crew. They had just witnessed the birth of a new age, one in which the Empire was no longer the dominant power in the galaxy. The question now was whether they could adapt to this new reality or whether their pride and fear would lead them to even greater disasters. Commander Chun was still visible on the main screen, waiting patiently for whatever came next. She had demonstrated power beyond imagination, but she had also shown restraint and compassion. Perhaps, if cooler heads prevailed, this day might be remembered as the beginning of a new era of cooperation rather than the start of humanity's conquest of the galaxy. But Zexai knew his people, and he knew Admiral Corvex. The Empire would not simply accept this demonstration of superior force and move on. They would study it, analyze it, and try to find ways to counter it. And that, he feared, would lead to consequences that no one was prepared to face. 3 hours after the failed attack on Discovery, the Imperial fleet maintained a cautious distance while emergency conferences took place across subspace communication networks. Commander Zexai found himself in the unusual position of being the Empire's foremost expert on humanity, having spent more time in direct contact with them than anyone else in the galaxy. Admiral Corvex had been relieved of command by the Imperial Council, replaced by Admiral Thane, a more diplomatic officer known for his ability to handle delicate first-contact situations. The change in leadership brought a shift in approach, but Zexai could sense the underlying tension that permeated every communication from Imperial Command. "Commander Chun," Admiral Thane's voice came through the communication system, carefully controlled and respectful. "I am Admiral Thane, assuming command of Imperial forces in this sector. I would like to formally apologize for the hostile actions taken against your vessel." On the main screen, Commander Chen nodded graciously. "Thank you, Admiral. I appreciate the apology, though I I understand that your predecessor was simply trying to protect his people. Fear of the unknown is a natural reaction among all species. Indeed, Thane agreed. However, I hope we can move past this unfortunate beginning and establish meaningful dialogue between our civilizations. Dr. Vin looked up from her science station, where she had been analyzing sensor data from the battle. Commander, the readings from their spatial distortion field are extraordinary. They're manipulating gravitational forces at a precision level that our best theories say should be impossible. Zexhai gestured for her to keep her voice down, but Chen apparently had excellent hearing. Dr. Vin, your observations are quite astute, the human commander said with a smile. Our gravitational manipulation technology is based on principles that took our scientists nearly 2 centuries to understand fully. I'd be happy to discuss the theoretical foundations with you sometime. You would share your scientific knowledge? Dr. Vin asked, her excitement barely contained. Within reasonable limits, Chen replied. We believe that scientific advancement benefits all intelligent species. However, some technologies require careful introduction to avoid disrupting social development. Admiral Thane spoke up again. Commander Chun, the Imperial Council has requested a formal meeting to discuss the possibility of establishing diplomatic relations between humanity and the Empire. Would you be willing to participate in such discussions? Chun considered the proposal carefully. I would be honored to participate, Admiral. However, I should mention that I'm not authorized to negotiate formal treaties on behalf of humanity. I can arrange for a diplomatic mission if our initial discussions prove productive. A diplomatic mission would require additional human vessels entering Imperial space, Thane observed cautiously. Not necessarily, Chen replied. We have communication systems that can maintain real-time contact across intergalactic distances. A diplomatic mission could be conducted entirely through subspace channels if preferred. Zexhai felt his understanding of the universe shift once again. Real-time communication across millions of light-years represented technology that made the Empire's fastest communication systems look like primitive smoke signals. How is that possible? Grand rumbled from his engineering station. Chen's expression became slightly apologetic. I'm afraid the underlying principles involve quantum mechanics at a level that would take considerable time to explain properly. Essentially, we use quantum entanglement effects to create instantaneous information transfer across any distance. Quantum entanglement breaks down over long distances. Dr. Vin protested, her scientific training rebelling against what she was hearing. Every experiment we've conducted shows decoherence effects that prevent large-scale applications. You're absolutely correct about naturally occurring entanglement, Chen agreed. However, we've developed methods for creating and maintaining artificial entanglement structures that can remain stable indefinitely. It's quite elegant once you understand the mathematics involved. Admiral Thane cleared his throat diplomatically. Perhaps we could arrange for a more detailed technical discussion at a later time. Commander Chun, would you be available to meet with Imperial representatives within the next few days? Of course, Chen replied, though I should ask about the format for such a meeting. Would you prefer to conduct discussions aboard one of your vessels, or would you like to visit Discovery? Security protocols would normally require meetings to take place aboard Imperial vessels, Thane admitted. However, given the unique circumstances, I'm willing to consider alternatives. Zexhai could hear the political calculation in the Admiral's voice. After the complete failure of their military attack, the Empire was in no position to make demands about meeting locations. I have a suggestion, Chen offered. Discovery carries several shuttlecraft designed for diplomatic missions. They're equipped with life support systems compatible with most known species and communication equipment for maintaining contact with both our ships. We could conduct preliminary discussions in neutral space. That sounds reasonable, Thane agreed. Who would represent the Empire in these discussions? Before the Admiral could continue, Dr. Vin spoke up urgently from her science station. Commander, I'm detecting additional contacts approaching our position. Multiple vessels, unknown signatures. Zexhai felt his heart skip a beat as he checked the tactical displays. 3 new ships had appeared at the edge of sensor range, moving toward their position at tremendous speed. Commander Chun, he said quickly, are those additional human vessels? Chen glanced at something off-screen, presumably her own sensor readings. Yes, those are UES Endeavor, Pathfinder, and Meridian. They're sister ships to Discovery, also conducting survey operations in this galaxy. 3 more ships, Admiral Thane said quietly, his voice containing a note of resignation. How many vessels does humanity have in this galaxy? As I mentioned earlier, 12 exploration ships are currently conducting surveys, Chen replied matter-of-factly. The others are positioned throughout the galaxy, studying various stellar phenomena and cataloging inhabited systems. 12 ships, 12 vessels with technology that could effortlessly neutralize the Empire's most powerful fleet. Zexhai found himself wondering how many other civilizations in the galaxy had already encountered human survey teams. Commander Chun, Admiral Thane said carefully, "Why are additional ships joining us now?" "Standard procedure when one of our vessels encounters potentially hostile contact," Chen explained. "Discovery automatically transmitted a situation report when your fleet opened fire. The other ships are responding to provide assistance if needed." "Assistance," Admiral Thane repeated slowly. "And what form would such assistance take?" Chen's expression became more serious. "Ideally, additional diplomatic personnel to help resolve any misunderstandings. In extreme cases, evacuation support for Discovery's crew. We prefer to avoid confrontation whenever possible." The three approaching human ships began decelerating as they neared the Imperial fleet's position. Even at maximum magnification, they remained frustratingly indistinct, their dark hulls seeming to absorb sensor energy rather than reflect it. "Sir," Lieutenant Cora called out from her sensor station, "the new contacts are taking positions around the Imperial fleet. Not threatening positions, but..." She paused, studying her displays. "They're positioning themselves to observe our ships from multiple angles. They're studying us," Dr. Venn realized. "Learning about our technology, our capabilities, our tactical formations." "Can you blame them?" Commander Chun asked gently. "Your fleet did open fire on a peaceful vessel. It would be negligent not to gather intelligence about potential threats." Admiral Thane was consulting with his staff over subspace channels, and Zexhai could imagine the heated discussions taking place. The Empire now faced 4 human ships instead of 1, each apparently capable of devastating their entire fleet. "Commander Chun," Thane said finally, "I believe this situation requires immediate diplomatic intervention. Would you be willing to begin formal discussions today rather than waiting for a more structured meeting?" "Certainly," Chun agreed. "I can have a diplomatic shuttle prepared within the hour." "Who would represent the Empire?" "I will personally lead the Imperial delegation," Thane replied, a decision that clearly surprised his own staff based on the increased chatter over military communication channels. "Admiral," Zexhai interjected, "regulations require the fleet commander to remain with his ships during potential crisis situations." "Commander, I think we're well past normal regulations," Thane replied dryly. "Besides, if humanity wanted to destroy our fleet, I doubt my presence or absence would make any difference." It was a sobering admission of just how completely the balance of power had shifted in the past few hours. "I would like to request permission to join the diplomatic mission," Dr. Venn announced suddenly. "The Empire needs a scientific representation in these discussions." "Granted," Thane agreed immediately. "Commander Zexhai, I'm also requesting your participation. You have more experience with humanity than anyone else in the Imperial fleet." Zexhai felt a mixture of honor and terror at being selected for what might be the most important diplomatic mission in galactic history. "Yes, sir. I'll prepare immediately." "Excellent," Chun said, apparently having overheard the conversation. "I'll have our diplomatic shuttle ready to receive your delegation shortly. I think you'll find the accommodations quite comfortable." Over the next hour, Zexhai found himself preparing for a meeting that could determine the future relationship between humanity and the Galactic Empire. He reviewed every piece of intelligence they had gathered about human technology, which was considerable, but still barely scratched the surface of their capabilities. Dr. Venn was similarly occupied, compiling scientific questions and observations for discussion with their human counterparts. Her excitement at the prospect of learning about advanced technology was barely contained, despite the potentially dire circumstances. Admiral Thane, meanwhile, was receiving emergency instructions from the Imperial Council via encrypted subspace channels. The conversations were classified, but Zexhai could guess their content based on the Admiral's increasingly grave expression. When the hour was up, a small craft detached itself from Discovery and approached Station Nexus 7. The shuttle was sleek and elegant, about 50 meters long, and clearly built for comfort rather than combat. As it docked with the station's shuttle bay, Zexhai found himself holding his breath. Everything that happened next would depend on whether two very different civilizations could find common ground, or whether fear and misunderstanding would lead them down a path toward conflict that could engulf the entire galaxy. The airlock cycled, and Zexhai got his first look at humanity beyond Commander Chen's image on a view screen. The shuttle's interior was spacious and well-lit, with comfortable seating and what appear to be advanced holographic displays showing star charts and technical diagrams. Two humans waited to greet them, both wearing the same gray uniforms they had seen on Chun. One was an older man with silver hair and kind eyes, the other a younger woman with dark skin and an expression of intelligent curiosity. "Welcome aboard," the older man said with a warm smile. "I'm Ambassador David Torres, and this is Dr. Linda Patel, our Chief Science Officer. We're honored to meet representatives of the Galactic Empire." As they settled into the shuttle's comfortable seats and began their journey to discovery, Zexhai found himself cautiously optimistic. These humans seemed genuinely interested in peaceful contact, despite their overwhelming technological advantage. But he also knew that first impressions could be deceiving, and that the real test would come when they began discussing the serious issues that separated their civilizations. The Empire was not accustomed to being the weaker party in diplomatic negotiations, and he wasn't sure how his government would handle the adjustment. The next few hours would determine whether this day would be remembered as the beginning of a new age of cooperation, or as the moment when humanity revealed their true intentions toward the galaxy they were so systematically surveying. As the shuttle approached Discovery, Zexhai found himself praying once again that wisdom would prevail over pride, and that the Empire would prove capable of adapting to a universe that had suddenly become much larger and more complex than they had ever imagined. The interior of UES Discovery exceeded every expectation Zexhai had formed during his years of encountering alien technology. The shuttle docked smoothly with what appeared to be a dedicated diplomatic bay, and as the airlock opened, he found himself staring into a corridor that seemed to stretch impossibly far into the distance. "The artificial gravity is remarkable," Dr. Venn whispered as they followed Ambassador Torres and Dr. Patel into the ship. "I can't detect any of the fluctuations or field interactions that our systems produce. Our gravity generators work on different principles than most technologies," Dr. Patel explained pleasantly. "We manipulate space-time curvature directly rather than using massive rotating sections or acceleration effects." Admiral Thane walked slightly ahead of the group, his military bearing evident even in the face of wonders that challenged everything he thought he knew about physics. "Dr. Patel, how large is this vessel exactly?" "The corridors seem much longer than our external sensor readings suggested." "Discovery is approximately 2 kilometers in external length," Ambassador Torres replied. "But internal space is somewhat larger due to spatial compression techniques. We can fit about 40% more interior volume than conventional architecture would allow." They were casually discussing technology that bent space itself to create more room inside a ship. Zexhai felt his worldview continuing to shift as they walked through corridors lined with displays showing star charts, scientific data, and what appear to be real-time images from across the galaxy. Ambassador Torres, Admiral Thane said carefully, "I must ask about the extent of humanity's presence in this galaxy. Your survey mission involves 12 ships, but what about support structures? Supply bases? Military escorts?" Torres paused at an intersection where several corridors met, his expression becoming more serious. "Admiral, I appreciate your directness. The truth is that Discovery and her sister ships are entirely self-sufficient. We don't require supply bases or military protection because our technology allows us to manufacture everything we need from raw materials." "Everything?" Dr. Venn asked incredulously. "Food, water, air, replacement parts, even complex electronics," Dr. Patel confirmed. "Our molecular fabrication systems can create virtually anything given sufficient energy and basic elemental materials." They entered what Torres identified as the main conference room, a spacious chamber with a large oval table surrounded by comfortable chairs. The walls displayed a panoramic view of space that was so clear and detailed it took Zexhai several moments to realize he was looking at holographic projections rather than actual windows. "Please, make yourselves comfortable," Torres suggested, gesturing toward chairs that automatically adjusted to accommodate their different physiologies. "Before we begin formal discussions, Would you like a brief tour of our scientific facilities? I think you might find them interesting. Very much so, Dr. Vin replied immediately, her scientific curiosity overcoming any concerns about security or protocol. Dr. Patel led them from the conference room through a series of laboratories and research facilities that redefined Zexhi's understanding of what was possible. They saw molecular fabrication chambers that could create complex devices in minutes, quantum computers that operated at room temperature without any of the massive cooling systems that Empire technology required, and biological research labs where human scientists studied samples from dozens of different star systems. This is incredible, Dr. Venn breathed, studying a display that showed the molecular structure of an unknown crystalline substance. You're conducting research on materials from across the galaxy simultaneously. Our mission is scientific as well as diplomatic, Dr. Patel explained. We're cataloging the incredible diversity of the universe, from stellar phenomena to biological systems to mineral compositions. Every system we visit teaches us something new. Admiral Thane was more focused on practical matters. Dr. Patel, these fabrication systems could revolutionize manufacturing across the galaxy. Are you willing to share such technology? Dr. Patel exchanged a glance with Ambassador Torres before answering carefully. That's exactly the kind of question we need to discuss in formal negotiations, Admiral. Humanity has protocols for sharing technology, but they involve careful consideration of how such advances might impact developing civilizations. Developing civilizations, Thane repeated slowly. Is that how humanity views the Galactic Empire? Not exactly, Torres replied diplomatically. Your empire has achieved remarkable things, uniting multiple species in peaceful cooperation across dozens of star systems. That's an accomplishment that many civilizations never achieve. However, your technology base is at a different level than ours. They returned to the conference room, where Commander Chun was waiting along with several other humans who were introduced as various department heads and specialists. The formal negotiations began with an exchange of basic information about their respective civilizations. Zexhi found himself describing the Empire's history, its political structure, and its achievements in bringing peace to a galaxy that had been torn apart by warfare for centuries. He spoke of trade networks that connected dozens of worlds, of scientific cooperation between species that had once been enemies, and of the collective security that had allowed billions of beings to live in peace. The humans listened with genuine interest and respect, asking thoughtful questions about how different species had learned to work together and how conflicts were resolved within the Empire's framework. In return, Ambassador Torres described humanity's own history, their expansion from a single world to a small cluster of star systems, and their eventual development of intergalactic travel capabilities. He spoke of humanity's commitment to exploration, their desire to understand the universe and their place in it, and their hope of making peaceful contact with other intelligent species. How long has humanity been capable of intergalactic travel? Dr. Vin asked during a pause in the formal presentations. Approximately 50 years, Dr. Patel replied. We've surveyed 17 different galaxies during that time, making contact with over 300 distinct civilizations. 300 civilizations. The number was staggering, representing more intelligent species than the Empire had encountered in its entire history. What has humanity learned from these contacts? Admiral Thane inquired. Ambassador Torres leaned forward, his expression becoming more thoughtful. That intelligence and civilization take countless different forms, Admiral. We've met species that communicate through biochemical signals, others that exist as pure energy, and some that experience time differently than most carbon-based life forms. Each contact has taught us something new about the nature of consciousness and civilization. And how do these civilizations view humanity? Zexhi asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. That varies considerably, Torres admitted. Some welcome our scientific knowledge and cultural exchange. Others prefer to remain isolated. A few have been hostile, though we've managed to resolve most conflicts through diplomacy. Most conflicts, Thane repeated. What about the ones that couldn't be resolved diplomatically? The conference room fell silent as the humans exchanged glances. Finally, Commander Chin spoke for the first time since the formal negotiations had begun. Admiral, humanity has encountered 7 civilizations that were actively engaged in genocide against other species in their galaxies. In those cases, we felt morally obligated to intervene. Intervene how? Zexai asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. We destroyed their ability to continue their genocidal activities, Chen replied simply. Their war fleets, their weapons production facilities, their transportation networks. We left them capable of defending themselves and maintaining their civilization, but unable to continue murdering other species. The implications hung heavy in the air. Humanity possessed not only the technology to cross between galaxies, but also the moral certainty to intervene in the affairs of other civilizations when they deemed it necessary. And if the Galactic Empire were conducting activities that humanity found morally objectionable, Admiral Thane asked quietly. Ambassador Torres was quiet for a long moment before responding. Admiral, we've studied your empire's history and current policies. While we don't agree with every decision your government has made, we see no evidence of systematic oppression or genocide. Your empire appears to be genuinely committed to peaceful coexistence between different species. But if that changed, Thane pressed, then we would face some very difficult decisions, Torres admitted. Humanity believes in the principle of non-interference, but we also believe that some actions are universally wrong, regardless of cultural context. Dr. Vin cleared her throat nervously. Ambassador Torres, what does humanity hope to achieve through contact with the Empire? What are your long-term goals? Torres smiled, and for the first time since the negotiations began, he looked genuinely enthusiastic. Dr. Vin, our primary goal is scientific and cultural exchange. Your empire has achieved something remarkable in creating a peaceful multi-species civilization. We'd like to learn from your experiences and share our own knowledge in return. What kind of knowledge sharing? Thane asked cautiously. Medical technology that could extend lifespans for all your species, Dr. Patel offered. Energy systems that could power your entire civilization without depleting natural resources. Communication technologies that could allow instantaneous contact between any 2 points in the galaxy. The offers were tempting beyond belief, representing solutions to problems that had plagued the Empire for centuries. But Zexai could see the concern in Admiral Thane's expression. Such advances would fundamentally change our civilization, the Admiral observed. All technological advancement does, Ambassador Torres replied. The question is whether the changes would be beneficial or harmful. We believe they would dramatically improve the quality of life for your citizens while preserving the political and cultural structures that you've worked so hard to create. Commander Chen leaned forward, her expression serious. However, we should also discuss the elephant in the room, as humans say. Our presence in this galaxy will inevitably become known to other civilizations. How will the Empire handle the knowledge that humanity exists and possesses superior technology? It was the question that Zexai had been dreading. The Empire's entire political structure was based on the assumption that they were the dominant power in the galaxy. Learning that they were not only not dominant, but actually quite primitive by comparison, would cause massive social and political upheaval. That depends largely on how this relationship develops. Admiral Thane replied carefully. If humanity is seen as a partner and ally, the transition might be manageable. If you're seen as a threat or as conquerors, the results could be catastrophic. We have no desire to conquer anyone, Ambassador Torres assured him. Humanity learned long ago that forced dominion leads only to resentment and rebellion. We prefer cooperation and mutual benefit. But you would defend yourselves if attacked, Zexai stated rather than asked. Of course, Commander Chen replied. Just as your empire would defend itself against unprovoked aggression. The negotiations continued for several more hours, covering topics from trade agreements to scientific cooperation to mutual defense pacts. Throughout the discussions, Zexai found himself impressed by the humans' genuine desire for peaceful relations and their willingness to offer substantial benefits in exchange for diplomatic recognition. But he also couldn't shake the feeling that the Empire was entering into negotiations as the clearly weaker party, dependent on humanity's goodwill for their continued independence and security. As the formal session drew to a close, Ambassador Torres made an unexpected offer. Admiral Thane, we would like to invite a small delegation from the Empire to visit our main base of operations in this galaxy. It would give your representatives a better understanding of our capabilities and intentions and allow for more detailed discussions about future cooperation. Where is this base located? Thane asked. In the void between galaxies, approximately 2 million light-years from your current position, Dr. Patel replied. The journey would take about 6 hours each way using one of our transport vessels. 6 hours to travel 2 million light-years. The casual way she mentioned crossing intergalactic distances in less time than it took the Empire's fastest ships to travel between neighboring star systems served as yet another reminder of just how advanced human technology really was. I'll need to consult with my government, Admiral Thane replied. Such a decision is beyond my authority. Of course, Torres agreed. Take all the time you need. We'll remain in this system while you consider our proposal. As the meeting ended and they prepared to return to the shuttle, Zexhai found himself reflecting on everything he had learned. Humanity appeared to be genuinely peaceful, but they also possessed the power to remake the galaxy according to their will if they chose to do so. The Empire's future now depended on maintaining the goodwill of beings who could cross between galaxies as easily as the Empire crossed between planets. It was a humbling realization for a civilization that had grown accustomed to being the dominant power in their corner of the universe. But perhaps, if they could adapt to this new reality, the Empire might find itself part of something much larger and more wonderful than they had ever imagined possible. The shuttle journey back to Station Nexus 7 was quiet, each member of the delegation lost in their own thoughts about the momentous changes that lay ahead. Behind them, Discovery waited patiently in space, a harbinger of a future that would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever experienced before.